well, which means incredibly long hours for our workers to make sure that they get everything they need. But there's another crisis in the making. Last month, two supermarket chains, Kroger and Albertsons, announced their plans for a $24.6 billion merger. This proposed merger has very widespread, concerning, and dangerous implications across the country, but particularly right here at home in Washington State and in Seattle. If this merger goes through, Seattle will be one of the places that is most impacted. We're standing between a Safeway right over there and a QFC. Safeway is under the Albertsons umbrella, QFC is under Kroger's. If these two giants merge, I am deeply concerned about the resulting effects on competition in the grocery industry, on the likely rising prices for consumers in a time of tremendous hardship, on smaller grocery businesses who simply can't compete with giants, and on the effect on labor markets and wages. I am the proud vice chair of the Antitrust Subcommittee of the Judiciary Committee in the House of Representatives, and I've been following the effects of market concentration on competition, on consumer prices, and on employee wages and bargaining power for a couple of years. In a 2019 study in the Review of Finance, the study found that over the past 2 decades, more than 3/4 of U.S. industries have grown more concentrated. As fewer larger players have controlled more of the market, markups for essential products have tripled. And the bottom line is this: when industries consolidate and concentrate into the hands of just a few big players, consumer choice dissipates, prices go up for working people while the pockets of CEOs and wealthy shareholders get padded, employment choices for workers go down, and with the lack of mobility, wages also go down. This is a pattern that the Antitrust Subcommittee has been investigating. Our 16-month investigation of the big four big tech companies for anti-competitive behavior yielded a bipartisan package passing through committee, of which one was my Ending Platform Monopolies bill. The Albertsons-Kroger merger is another example of market concentration that must be investigated closely. And that is why today, just 15 minutes ago, I released a letter to the Federal Trade Commission Chair, Lina Khan, asking her to do that investigation. My letter outlines a number of concerns around effects of the merger on competition, workers, and consumers that have actually been a concern for some time. It was almost a decade ago when the FTC did a report that found that concentration in the grocery industry resulted in significant increases in consumer prices. The COVID pandemic has exacerbated those effects, with customers paying significantly higher prices for basic necessities, even while major U.S. corporations reported record profits. In fact, Kroger saw its net earnings for the first 2 quarters of 2020 jump to more than $2.031 billion, almost double the profit from the same period a year earlier. Working in a grocery store used to be the epitome of a good middle-class job. A job that would allow you to have a family, a roof over your head, money to send the kids on to a better life than you had, and some savings for your retirement. Today, despite the enormously wonderful efforts of the union, this is still far too rarely the case. Too many grocery workers today are homeless or barely surviving, relying on food stamps and other public aid as a result of companies' low pay and lack of comprehensive benefits. And yet still, Kroger's CEO, just for comparison, made $22 million in 2020, more than 900 times as much as the median worker. Merging these stores will only drive down wages even further, as workers will have little choice of employers and less ability to bargain for higher wages or better working conditions. My letter, and this was a letter that was written with Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee, as well as Chairman of the subcommittee, David Cicilline, and Representative Adam Smith, points out the negative effects on small businesses as well. When just a few large companies dominate a market, they can dictate prices and terms to their suppliers who have no other options. It is already the case that big businesses dominate the food and goods supplier contracts, and small businesses struggle to compete. In fact, a March 2022 survey found that 65% of small businesses consider the unfair advantages of big competitors a top challenge to their sustainability. And they worry that they're going to be driven out of business by these big corporations who can afford, by the way, to lower consumer prices with the expectation that once somebody's been driven out of the market, they can raise those prices again. That is exactly why mom and pop stores tend to disappear when conglomerates enter the market. And then, by the way, if that big store leaves, the community is left with a grocery desert, as has happened with Walmarts across the country. So it is my hope that the Federal Trade Commission heeds our call and gives this proposed merger the close scrutiny that it merits. For the first time in decades, we have a president in President Biden who is pro-competition and has installed people like Commissioner Khan who understand deeply the need for more enforcement of antitrust laws and stricter regulation. We in government have to be a strong line of defense for working people and for consumer choice. That is exactly why we enacted antitrust laws in the first place, because we recognize the benefits of a thriving competitive market for consumers, workers, small businesses, and for our economy that simply cannot be obtained without a strong regulation of this kind of anti-competitive behavior. And with that, let me turn it over to somebody who has been working on behalf of workers across the region, across many states actually, my friend Faye Gunther, the president of UFCW 3000.
So my name's Faye Gunther. I'm the president of UFCW 3000. It's the largest UFCW in the United States with over 50,000 members in Washington, Idaho, and a little bit of Oregon. We have more than 30,000 grocery store workers in stores like the QFC here and the Safeway over there. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and thank you for being here. When we heard about the news that Kroger planned to buy Albertsons and merge, we immediately took action and condemned it for what it would do to workers, shoppers, and communities. We saw what happened with Hagen, and we know from research and lived experience that mergers like this hurt consumers, they hurt workers, and they hurt folks up and down the food supply chain. We also immediately realized that the private equity firms that owned Albertsons were trying to hit pay dirt by grabbing the $4 billion as quickly as possible and getting out the door with little scrutiny from folks that should be scrutinizing these sorts of things. We united with essential grocery store workers and UFCW locals in DC, California, Colorado, here in the state of Washington, as well as UFCW 367 down in Pierce County and Teamsters 38. This unified over 120,000 grocery store workers against this merger. We spoke with anyone who would listen, and our fight to protect our communities is spreading across the nation with over 100 TV, print, and radio stories covering this event. We reached out to regulators and federal officials, including our state attorney general, Bob Ferguson. The lawsuit from his office is the single case in the entire nation that is still holding back the $4 billion payout that Albertsons had planned as part of the merger. Private equity firms wanted to get paid out on November 7th, and our work has stopped this. We want the $4 billion invested back in the stores to lower food prices for consumers and protect the workers who are going to be feeding us all throughout this holiday season and fed us the entire time the pandemic was going on. We have reached out to the U.S. senators and are looking forward to what we understand will be a hearing early December in D.C., and hoping grocery store workers will be joining me in D.C. Our members will be there, and we want grocery store workers and consumers to be heard during this process. And in the House, we have the great work of Representative Jayapal, who has been working with us so closely for so many years, and we are so lucky to have her and applaud all of the work that she has done. And in particular, we applaud her work to call out the significant antitrust threats from this proposed merger. Thank you, Congresswoman Jayapal. I would like to introduce one of our members who will say a few words. Frontline grocery store workers have always been there for our communities. They've always been there for our communities. And now we ask all of you to stand with grocery store workers. If this merger goes through, there are thousands of jobs at risk. So you should hear directly from the workers that will be most impacted. And this is Naomi Olegario from Safeway.
Hi there, my name is Naomi Olegario, as Ms. Faya said. I've worked for 37 years as a grocery store worker at Safeway. And all those years, I've seen a lot. Most recently, I have lived through the COVID experience, and me and coworkers have served our community and served our employers. We have gone the extra mile and provided essential services in a time of crisis. Over the years, our work as cashiers, produce and dairy clerks, meat and seafood departments, bakers, nighttime stockers, and price changers, and helper clerks, and more, we have all helped make our stores run. UFCW 3000 has over 32,000 grocery store workers in our union. From the peninsula where I work to Bellingham, from the Tri-Cities to that QFC right across the street, the tens of thousands of workers at Safeway, Albertsons, Fred Meyer, and QFC have continued to work hard and play by the rules, while our employers have been profiting off our labor. No one will take issue with them making a little profit. That's part of the deal. What's not part of the deal is that during COVID, as more shoppers shopped more and the companies often had fewer staff working harder for less, these companies made extra billions in profit, and now they are proposing to take that money and run. So when we heard the announcement in the media that Kroger had agreed to buy Albertsons, and they claimed all would be good, I was like, I've seen this before. I saw what happened when Albertsons bought out Safeway a handful of years ago. They too promised all will be good. And in the end, it was not good. They too promised all would be good, and in the end, it was not good. Stores were closed. Hagen went bankrupt. People lost their jobs. In some cases, the company brought back closed stores from Hagen that they had divested from owning in order to get their merger. It's not fair as workers. I went through that, and I almost didn't get my job. And I've seen my coworkers, some did not, and I had to go and reapply to get my job back with Safeway. They need to be held accountable. We need to stop this so they don't become a monopoly, as what they are proposing to do. Sorry, a little nervous. Anyways, I hope that we can stop this and we can make it work, that they don't take over and take advantage of us as workers in the community and keeping our jobs safe, because that's the biggest fear, is that we're going to lose jobs again, that they're going to close stores again. We need to stop this. Thank you.
Right. I'm Sean Scott, the Policy and Field Campaign Lead with the Statewide Poverty Action Network. We're an organization, a nonprofit that's dedicated to addressing and alleviating the root causes of poverty in Washington State. And we recognize that fair consumer choice is a form of consumer protections. When megacorporations merge to become even more powerful, options get limited, prices might increase, and everyday people who are already feeling the pinch of inflation and rising costs of living suffer. At the individual level, we know that supermarkets are a part of personal well-being. Collectively, the availability of fresh food bolsters better health community outcomes. Per 2020 data from the Washington State Food Security Survey, nearly a third of Washington households faced food insecurity, including in Central Seattle, South Seattle, and right here in West Seattle. When a grocery store closes, so does a pathway to a better quality of living. Everyday people who rely on their neighborhood stores as a lifeline need to have the security and feel safe in knowing that they're not going to be cut off. In the same way that Washington State grocery store workers, who have been the backbone of our communities through this pandemic, deserve to have security. And our understanding at the Statewide Poverty Action Network is that the proposed acquisition that we're discussing today introduces instability into a situation that is already very unstable. In the work that we do at Poverty Action Network, we have listening sessions with everyday people, working people, struggling people in all four corners of Washington State, all of whom feel increasingly that their lives and their futures are in peril by forces that are outside of their control. It's one of the reasons why we are joining in solidarity with others to applaud the work that Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal has been doing to look into this issue, in the same way that we stand in solidarity with UFCW 3000 and other unions across the state in helping to make a better future for working people, not just tomorrow, but also today. So with that, I want to hand it back over to Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sean. Thank you, Naomi, for sharing your experience. Thank you, Faye, for your leadership. Happy to take any questions if anyone has them for any of us.
Yeah, what possible outcomes of this investigation, if it happens, could you envision?
Well, the FTC can decide to weigh in and through their investigation, if they feel that this really does prove challenging for competition, for labor monopolies or monopolies, that they could remedy that situation. They could prevent the merger from going through. I think it's very important to have the investigations. You know, that under previous administrations, we have really had a decline in the number of investigations in the pre-merger investigations. What happens is these mergers happen, there haven't been investigations, and then people say, oh my goodness, that shouldn't have happened, and they point back to 5 or 10 years ago. I think this chair is looking at things very differently, and I hope that she will investigate this and stop it from going forward should it prove to have the anti-competitive effects that I believe it would. Anybody else?
Regarding the word monopoly, there's been some charts that have shown that the merger will still bring them not close to America's leading grocer, which is Walmart. So how is it that with Walmart being so dominant that we really can use the word monopoly in this case?
I'm not necessarily saying that there is a monopoly situation in this. It's a very, you're right to point to the very specific definition. However, concentration in the marketplace is very much a part and parcel of what the FTC needs to be investigating. So, and monopsony and the idea that workers can't move, if you essentially go from one player controlling 13% and another player controlling essentially the rest of it, big player like Walmart, you don't necessarily continue to get more competition. You really need to have multiple players. So we'll see what the FTC says. I'm looking for their investigation and their real results. But I think what we know is market concentration, even separate from a monopoly situation, does affect all of these other things, from consumer prices to workers' wages. Anybody else?
This question for the fans.
Yep.
How far is the Grocers Union willing to take this fight against the merger?
Well, we are going to do whatever we can. The thing that we're also very worried about is this, prior to the merger, the $4 billion that could be spent mostly to the private equity firms, 70% to the private equity firms. We believe that makes it so Albertsons is in a weaker position and we want Albertsons to be strong and to be competing. And that $4 billion gets put back in the stores to lower consumer prices, to ensure workers are getting paid what they should be paid, and to make sure their pensions are safe. So we're going to do whatever it takes. We're going to go to D.C. and testify if they'll let us as witnesses. We are going to do whatever we can to stop Kroger from buying Albertsons.
All right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming out. We appreciate it. And thank you to everybody who's here and who spoke and shared your experiences. Fantastic. Okay.